This is the presentation for grid and snap settings. First, to turn the grid on and off, or the snap on and off, you can do that by clicking on the icons down on the status bar, whether it's grid or snap, to turn them on or off. I'm going to right click on one of them, either or, click on settings, and you bring up the drafting settings dialog box, and notice there's different tabs going across the top. It automatically opens to the snap and grid tab. Looking at grid spacing, this is the distance between the grid lines or grid dots. 0.5 units is the default. If I was in architectural units, it would be half an inch, but in decimal it's 0.5 units, that's the default. You can also turn the grid on or off here with the checkbox. And then where it says grid style, the default now in AutoCAD is to have lines, but if you prefer the old dot system, you can simply check the boxes here and you're going to get dots instead of lines. And the dots are not printable, just like the lines are not printable on the screen. It's just a visual reference. You can also put the dots in the block editor, or you can put the dots in the sheet layouts. That's what those check boxes are for. I'm going to leave it set to lines. We've already talked about grid spacing. If you want a major line every 5 lines, it's going to be a little bit thicker line, I suggest that you leave that on. And then we talk about the grid behavior. You could have an adaptive grid, meaning if you zoom way in or zoom out, it's going to adapt somewhat to the surroundings, and you could have that checked. I suggest that you uncheck adaptive grid, because otherwise, why even set the distance between them? Typically if I want a visual aid, I want to know how big my drawing is compared to the dots or the spacing of the lines on the screen. But if I have the adaptive grid, that's not going to be accurate. The other one that I strongly suggest that you uncheck is the display grid beyond the limits. That'll make more sense when you get to the limits presentation, but uncheck that as well. When you say OK, my grid's going to come on. It might be hard for you to see, but I got major lines every 5 grid spaces, and I've got minor lines in between, which are half unit apart. So my major lines in that case would be 2.5 units apart. And they're lines versus dots. I'm going to go back to the drafting settings dialog box, and we also have snap. Now this is snap, not OSnap, just snap. Snap is another feature of AutoCAD that forces the crosshairs to jump at preset increments. In this case, a half a unit, X and Y. Now let's leave it set to that, and we have an equal X and Y spacing, and it's turned on. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to go to the line command. Notice my crosshairs jump to every half space unit. And I can double up and go 2 spaces if I want. I can go 1 at a time. But you get the idea as far as the spacing goes. The snap feature is a nice feature. It's not used as much as you would think. Some areas where it is used in architectural drafting would be for cabinet drawings, where all of the cabinets are constructed in 3-inch increments. That's one place where it works out nice. There's some other examples in your textbook as well, but again, just know that the snap feature is not used as much as you would think. So that's drawing with snap on. Now I'm going to erase those items. Go down to snap or grid, go back to settings. Next we'll talk about the snap type. We've been drawing with a rectangular snap. I'm going to change that to isometric. I'm also going to go up here to grid style and change it so that I put dots instead of lines in the model space. I find it easier to draw isometrically with the dots. And this way you can also see what the dots would look like. Clicking OK. Notice my crosshair turns to an isometric crosshair, and my lines turns to dots for the grid, and they're turned at 120 degrees or 30 degrees for isometric drawing. I'm going to go to the line command, and I'll very quickly just draw a small isometric shape. It is still considered a 2D drawing, but I can draw isometrically fairly quickly. So you can see drawing isometrics in 2D is fairly easy in AutoCAD as well when you use the ISO snap. Okay, so that's the isometric snap feature there in AutoCAD. Now we're going to change back to rectangular snap. And instead of grid snap, I'm going to change the snap type to polar snap. Under polar distance, we'll change that to 2 units. I'll say OK. I'm going to make sure that polar is turned on down here on the status bar. I go to the line command. I'm going to pick any point on the screen, and it's not going to snap to any one particular point. But after I do that, notice that it's going to jump at 2 unit increments. I can only jump 2, 4, 6, 8. So I'll go 10 units. So as you can see, it makes it very easy to draw at specific length units. When it's set to 2-unit increments, it was very easy to go 10 units long, 8 units high, 10 units back, and 10 units down. So that is the polar snap feature. And it's best used with polar or ortho turned on. That's polar snap. So that wraps up the presentation for the Snap and Grid tab on the Drafting Settings dialog box. Please let me know if you have any questions.